Welcome to Candidate Conversations, brought to you by DCTV. I'm Larry Brown Jr. Today I'll be talking to your candidates for delegate to the House of Representatives, mayor, chair of the DC City Council, and at-large Ward 3 and Ward 5 council members. Ahead of our conversation, candidates selected 2 topics from a list of 9. This is an opportunity to hear from the candidates ahead of the general election. This is not intended to be a debate. Candidates have an opportunity to respond for up to 2 minutes, uninterrupted, and they will not be allowed to interrupt other candidates during their response. We are joined by candidates for at-large city council, and we will begin with each one of the candidates introducing themselves and telling us a little bit about their platform. Let's start with David Schwartzman. Hi, David.
Yes, greetings, everyone. A pleasure to be here. I am a candidate for the DC State Green Party, which is the only ballot status party which does not accept corporate developer donations. I'm a retired Howard University professor. I taught there 39 years. I've been retired for 10 years. And I'm a climate scientist and an activist and a human rights activist. So I first ran for office in 1998 and several times since. And I've always put forward as a prime objective the elimination of child poverty in DC, which is certainly achievable given our more than adequate tax base, but it should have been done years ago, because child poverty has devastating impacts not only to the child as they grow up, the family, and the community. And so I've also promoted progressive taxes in DC for many years. And last summer, we had a major victory when our local government passed a tax hike on the wealthy, their income tax rate. And as a result, we had revenue targeted to important goals, in particular to raise the DC earned income tax credit to match the federal tax credit, which has helped tens of thousands of families in DC of low-wage workers to house the homeless, to begin doing that more effectively, and to give income to early childhood educators. So my platform is centered around bringing a Green New Deal for DC, and more details can be found on my website, which I'll put in the chat.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much. Graham, go ahead. Let's go ahead for your introduction.
40% of you across the city are still undecided. And really, I'm speaking to those folks to say, you have a choice in front of you. You have 2 votes for your at-large DC council member. You have an opportunity for 3 council members who have a record of 8+ years of service that you can look at. And you can look at new candidates who offer the prospect of change. One of the things that I've heard on the 24,000 doors that I've knocked on is that people want change. They're tired of the same. They're tired of divisions and binaries. They really want someone who can unify the city, but also they want to be able to see the possibility of our $20 billion budget to help people across this city. I run a health equity program that serves over 100 million people, so I know how to make an impact at scale. And I've worked deeply in the community, including opening my home to guys coming out of prison, mentoring 2 boys for 8 years, and being on the board of a number of education and advocacy organizations. I'm asking for one of your 2 votes to drive positive change. The Washington Post called me our best hope for change as they endorsed me as their first choice. And the National Association of Social Workers said that I align to their values of compassion and social, racial, and economic justice. I would ask you to band with the Washington Post and DC social workers and help me make positive change in the city.
Thank you. Alyssa?
Great. Thank you, Larry. Good afternoon to everyone. I'm Alyssa Silverman. I am one of the incumbents. I've been serving you for 8 years on the council, and just like everyone else here, I'm asking for one of your two votes. I'm told I can't ask for both. Now, campaigns are about contrasts. They are. As a voter, you have to decide, what makes me different than any of the other candidates, and how do I align with your values? So I will say that if you support nurses in this city, grocery store workers in this city, teachers in this city, painters, and all the folks in construction in this city, the groups that represent those workers support me. And they support me because in my 8 years on the council, I have fought to make sure that workers have a voice in this city. And that's why I have a campaign that is full of small contributors, $100 or less. And one of the big contrasts is, Graham talked about the Washington Post. The Washington Post has endorsed the two candidates here who get their money from limited liability companies, from developers, from restaurants who don't want to pay the minimum wage to workers. That's the big contrast. I think that, an example of how I fought for workers is to make sure that when you have a new child in your family, when you have an illness in your family, when you're sick yourself, that you can take time off and not have it be a financial calamity. It's called paid family leave. It is a bill that indeed I co-authored, built a coalition that got the bill, which was controversial by the same groups who are giving those $1,000 contributions, fought paid family leave.
And I will have to stop you there, Alyssa, because we are a little over time for your time there.
Thanks, Larry. I appreciate it.
Sure. Kareem, your turn.
Hey, Larry, thank you for the time and the opportunity to be able to speak directly to the voters. Like was said earlier, this is an opportunity for change. My name is Kareem Marshall. I'm a third-generation Washingtonian, a lawyer by trade, and I have 12 years of executive experience in the district government. I'm currently the general counsel for a nonprofit, and I'm on a leave of absence from it in order to be able to try to convince you that the way we can improve the district government is to bring in something new, something different, a new voice for district residents. I'd like to be able to use my experience in working in the executive to be able to make our council the council that it could be. We currently have a group of council members that aren't living up to their potential. And the great thing is that you as the voters have the opportunity to look at what they've done and hold them accountable for it, and you can pick someone else. I can bring you the opportunity to have a council that's proactive, that works constructively, that thinks about solutions as opposed to sound bites and credit, that talks about building a council that's a stronger institution and actually improve your lives. This November, you have the opportunity to start over. You have the opportunity to look at the council and say, we deserve better. We deserve a government that's thoughtful, that's consistent, that writes laws that fit our needs as a jurisdiction, that makes sure that those laws are funded and implemented properly, and actually listens to you to make sure that you have an understanding and they have an understanding of the issues that touch your life. My name's Kareem Marshall. I'm number 2 on the ballot, and I'm asking for one of your 2 votes. Thank you.
Thanks, Kareem. Fred, let's look to you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Larry. My name is Fred Hill. I am running for City Council at large. I am number 3 on the ballot as an independent. And for over 25 years, I've been a successful business owner who has hired in the Washington, D.C. area, who has hired over 500 D.C. residents, 180 returning citizens. So I do definitely understand what workforce development looks like. The other thing is that I am a veteran who understands planning and execution. I'm a father and I'm a grandfather who understands that our schools have not delivered what they should have done. And quite frankly, I grew sick and tired of watching those who had been elected before not carry through on the promises that they gave many of the voters some years ago. I've watched this government take advantage of small businesses. I, being a small business here right now, currently, are fighting the city for over $200,000 that was not paid. At one point, they owed me over $1 million and expected me to continue on contracts that we had agreed on, but that's only if we get paid. Kenny McDuffie will tell you that I came to his office to get assistance. Well, not just his office, but everyone on the council, including the mayor's office. And when they all failed me, I added that on top of what we see going on right now with the housing, with the public safety, and with our educational needs that have been failing the people of this city for far too long. All of them have been on 8, 10, or 12 years. And what we haven't seen is a consistent level of oversight in any of the agencies that they are on committees on. Right now, many people have seen in the media that the housing just in the last month has captured a great deal of the media's attention about the unfairness that many of our people are living in, the unfair conditions that they're living in. And for not to have provided the listening ear of those who needed help and the oversight that they were swore to give the people of the city is an abomination.
Thank you so much, Fred. We have to stop right there. We're over time on you. Kenyon, you have the final introduction.
And thank you. My name is Kenyon McDuffie. I'm a 4th generation Washingtonian. I'm a husband, a father of 2 daughters. And for 10 years, I served as a Democrat representing Ward 5 on the Council of the District of Columbia. And I'm running to be your next at-large council member to create safer neighborhoods with greater economic opportunities for every resident across our city. I'm running because growing up in the 1980s and 1990s, I saw firsthand the toll that drugs, violence, and hopelessness took on our city. And it was an opportunity to be a mail carrier with the United States Postal Service that literally changed the entire trajectory of my life and put me on a path to become the first man in my family to graduate from college, work for Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton, and to graduate from law school and serve as a civil rights attorney with the United States Department of Justice. But it was my desire to improve my own community and change the odds of those struggling around me that first led me to run for public office. And I'm running today because now more than ever, the council needs bold leaders with a track record of delivering the results, like authoring bills that make our government more transparent, innovative solutions to public safety like the NEAR Act, solutions to racial equity like the Racial Equity Achieved Results Act, a landmark baby bonds law that's going to help children born into poverty build wealth. I'm running to help create a city that is safe, that is more equitable, more just, and more inclusive. I'm Kenyon McDuffie. I'm number 4 on the ballot, and I ask for one of your 2 at-large votes.
Thanks, Kenyon, and everyone for your introductions. I want to turn to the topic of education. And Fred, I'll begin with you. You spoke a few moments ago about your passion for the future for the district. Can you discuss your vision for improved free education for district residents?
Yes, thank you for that question. The first thing that we need to do is we need to remove the school operations from under the mayor. The next piece that needs to be done is that on the council, there needs to be a committee over the schools that monitors what's going on right now, because we don't have that. The teachers that have not been paid year on end have experienced the same thing with no excuse whatsoever. So we need to make sure that they're paid, and then also increase the pay of our school teachers, the workers, janitors, and the cooks that are in the schools. The other thing that we need to do is we need to put vocational ed back into our public school system. This was pulled away many years ago, and crime has only gone up every year since. The members on the council have the responsibility of making sure there's a more equitable school solution, and none have done that right now. And that's what I would do as the new council at large, one of your 2 choices. Thank you.
Thanks, Fred. Kareem, how about you? You mentioned some pretty specific accomplishments in your life that I know would take some great educational resources to be able to fulfill. What is your vision for free education so that other young people coming up behind you might blaze the same trail or a new trail alongside yours?
So the reason I love education so much, and I also want to note that the Washington Teachers Union endorsed me as well. I'm the only non-incumbent that was able to get an endorsement from a major labor union, and that's huge. But as far as public education, I want to point out the fact that I owe everything I've been able to do in my life to the foundation that was provided by a DCPS education. And a lot of the ways that we talk about public education in the district, both for public and for public charter, is a little dismissive. I know what our schools can do if they're properly resourced and firing on all cylinders. Our kids are able to compete with anybody in the country. I know because I've done it. And I know that the kids coming after me are even smarter than I am. So I'm amazed, and I'm really excited to see what they're going to be able to do if we properly take care of their teachers and if we properly take care of their facilities and the communities around them. But the first thing we have to do, the absolute core thing we have to do, is we have to stop pitting public schools versus charter schools. They are all our kids, and they all deserve to be adequately educated in schools that are adequately resourced, and so they have the opportunity to see what the future holds for them. I would make sure that whatever system we move into, if we move away from mayoral control to something that's a little more feedback friendly, if we change the structure, if we do a unified school district, all of this is structural. We still need to make sure that as a government, we are respecting our teachers and caring for our kids. And it doesn't really matter what system that they're in. We need to make sure that we're working to make sure that both configurations or all configurations work for all students.
Thank you. Let's talk about the climate. With the rise of development across the city, many people are concerned about having access to food that is homegrown. David, how can we look at expanding urban farming across DC?
Well, yes, I think urban farming, agroecologies need to be promoted by the city, and they are blossoming around DC, and it's very important to shift the nutritional supplies, especially Eastern River, to more healthful foods. And I know that these efforts are continuing, but the question really was on climate. And the climate issue, if you permit me to address that, is really extremely important. The future of our children and grandchildren depends on what we do now in terms of reducing carbon emissions, which at the same time, we reduce harmful air pollution, which drives childhood asthma and a whole variety of diseases in adults as well, including dementia. Here's some concrete approaches to deal with this. One, we should pass the free metro bill, and electrify the buses at the same time. That would serve to reduce car traffic. We should have a congestion charge downtown and use that revenue to complement the free metro bill and make the bus service more accessible. We should as well municipalize our utilities, take over our utilities for the public interest, and then allow democratic planning to maximize the transition to out of fossil fuel consumption. And that includes natural gas, which is leaking out of the streets right now, which is a very potent greenhouse gas.
Thanks so much, David. We're at time for that response. Thank you. Alyssa, I want to talk about homelessness a little bit. We've seen reports that say homelessness in the district is on a downward trend. What strategies will you use to ensure that this trend continues to cycle downward? And what will you do to ensure that district residents can maintain their housing once they are housed?
Sure. Thanks for the question, Larry. So we need to get people into homes. That's the solution to homelessness. And I believe David mentioned it in his introduction because he normally does. But one of the big ways in which we have fought homelessness and gotten people into homes is by raising taxes on the highest earners in the city. And again, another contrast here in that I supported that. And what it did is it funded vouchers to get people out of tents and into homes. Now, here's where the rubber hits the road with district government. We still haven't used all the vouchers, and we need to do that. It's very important that we do that. We also need to make sure for a lot of the people, look, if you're living in a tent, there are probably some more issues going on with you than just income. And that's why that voucher to move you from tents into homes is called permanent supportive housing. Emphasis on supportive, because people need help living autonomously, whether it be a social worker, whether it be help managing medication, whether it be just help troubleshooting, what do you do when the toilet overflows? But to keep people in their homes, look, we need to make a decision as a government. Who are we building homes in this city for? Are we building them for developers to make a profit? Because that's why they're giving. Now, I don't chagrin a developer making a profit, but we need to make homes for working families in this city, for the people who support me, the nurses, the teachers. They also endorse Kareem, grocery store workers. But look, everybody on here knows the rent is too damn high in this city, and that you can't afford to buy a home in this city if you don't already own one. And so we need to make a decision as a government, Larry, to make the investments, both in terms of rental assistance and in terms of mortgage assistance, so that families can actually live here at all stages of their life.
Thanks, Alyssa. Thanks for that. Kenyon, you mentioned that you are a fourth generation Washingtonian, so you've been here for quite some time, and you've also been able to make some observations and draw opinions from that, I'm sure. Health, education, criminal justice are all areas in which we can pinpoint disparities in the district. Tell me this: what in your eyes at this time is one of the leading disparities, racially speaking, that you could pinpoint in the district, and how do you plan to address that if elected again?
It's a great question. I think it's one on the minds of Washingtonians across the District of Columbia. And I think it's the racial wealth gap that exists here in the nation's capital. A lot of people outside of the city don't know that Washington, D.C. has one of the largest racial wealth gaps of any city in the United States. Right here in our city, the median white wealth is 81 times that of the median Black wealth. You talk about $284,000 for white households versus $3,500 for Black households. And so when we think about how our city is changing and becoming more diverse, which is positive, we have to think about the ways that our economic growth benefits some people and leaves some people behind, right? So as we develop our city, we need to make sure we take into account all the ways that economic development impacts those who are underserved and prioritize ways that we can include them in the process. And so it's one of the reasons why I've thought about ways to help close the racial wealth gap. And it's one of the bills that I'm proud of, which is the Child Wealth Building Act. I authored a bill that we affectionately refer to as baby bonds to help close the racial wealth gap. If you're born into a family making up to 300% of the federal poverty level, you get an account created for you just by being born into poverty. And over the years, it accrues interest so that when you turn 18 years old, you have $25,000 sitting in an account waiting for you to invest in yourself, to do things like, go to college or take up a trade or to start a small business. And those are the things that people do to create wealth in this country for generations. And it's time that a District of Columbia government use those types of tools to help people who have been left behind. with economic prosperity that we've seen more recently. And finally, I just want to mention the Racial Equity Achieved Results Act. I authored that bill, which established the DC Council's Office on Racial Equity.
And we are at time, Kenyon. Graham, I'd like to ask the same question to you. You're free to add, you're free to uplift what you see as the leading disparity and how you plan to address that as well.
It's hard to point out just one. Kenyon talked about the wealth gap. There's a life expectancy difference of 15 years based on the color of your skin and where you're born in this city. In a city of the greatest wealth in the nation, we have the highest level of senior food insecurity. There are so many places where we have significant disparities. I've done the work personally in numerous ways. You know, we just talked about housing. I opened my own home to men coming home from prison to try to do a small part, but then lived in intentional community with returning citizens, but then saw, gosh, we do need to create pathways to entrepreneurship. So partnered with a number of formerly incarcerated men and women to launch their own businesses that now hire 40 DC residents. We need that level of tactical focus support. We can talk about all the problems that we have. We can say the good speeches, you know, I heard we need to make a decision as a government on X. You know, we have all of these challenges that we need to address, et cetera. My push is, if we're going to address the challenges in different ways, we need different people coming up with solutions. I've been doing it at a ground level in this city for 20 years, and I do it nationally, ending health disparities across hundreds of or tens of millions, over 100 million people. My hope is to bring that type of creative solution, the idea of rolling up your sleeves and trying to get things done, because how we're not going to accomplish this is demonizing one group over another. It's going to be 13 council members coming together in centering policy on hearing from folks who are most impacted, whether it's racial disparities or otherwise, to be able to create policy that works for everyone. So my goal is to come in, work really hard, term limit myself, put in as much energy as I can, partner with people across this city, not care who gets credit, and actually make a difference on some of these disparities we see.
Thank you. And as we look to wrap, all of you have given various points from your platforms and shared what your vision is, what you will do for district residents if elected. But there might still be someone who's still to make a determination on their 2 votes for this particular election. And I want to give you the opportunity to respond to those individuals and fill in the blank, if you will. And this is your prompt, and I'm going to go to all of you to answer this prompt. The prompt is, you should pick me because, and I'll start with you, David.
Yes, I had submitted racial disparities too as a question. So I want to address that briefly in response to your question. Graham referred to the life expectancy gap between Black and white residents. It's not only shockingly high, but it's grown since 2000. It's actually grown. It's more than 16 years for Black men and more than 12 years for Black women, lower lifespan. Does Black Lives Matter really matter in DC? Does our local government really take account of this challenge? I think not, because the trickle-down economic policies that have dominated our government have actually driven this higher life expectancy gap. And I would point also to child poverty, which more than 20,000 children, mainly Black children living mainly east of the river, suffer from child poverty. And the DC government can address this and radically reduce child poverty by boosting the TANF income support level, which is 37% of the federal poverty level. New Hampshire, white kids get 60%. And that is a recommendation of the Fair Budget Coalition, which I work closely with for this coming fiscal year, but the council did not address this. And so that's another area which actually can address the challenge of racial disparities. And finally, as far as Kenyon validly pointed to the racial wealth gap. Well, if we change our focus in housing to social housing and community land trusts, then families will be able to save money because they will only be paying 30% or less of household income for housing.
And that's your time. Thanks so much, David. Thanks, David. Graham, let's go to you. You should pick me because.
You should pick me because whether you use your head or your heart in the voting booth, there are reasons to take action as one of your 2 votes. The Washington Post called me their first choice and our best hope for change because I'll use data to attack problems. But Washington, D.C. social workers endorsed me because they felt that I was most aligned to their values of economic, social, and racial justice because of the work that I've been doing in the city and because of my heart. We need change. We need to use evidence-based practices to create the greatest yield that we can on our $20 billion budget, the most per resident of any city in the nation. We have the resources. We need the collaboration, the management in the heart to be able to use those resources to support every person in this community so that we don't have the disparities that we talked about today, and also have a thriving, high quality of life that addresses the things that residents care about the most and that I've heard from you that aren't being addressed now. Thank you for your consideration. Thank you all for hosting us, and I hope I can earn one of your 2 votes.
Thank you. Alyssa, you should pick me because.
You never have to doubt who I'm fighting for, Larry. And it's for working families in this city. Black families, white families, Asian families, Latino families. You know, that is my agenda, is to help working families. And that's why the social workers endorse me, as well as, you know, Graham. And as I said, the teachers, nurses, grocery store workers, you know, endorse me because, you know, we talk about the racial wealth gap, but how did this city develop the way it did? Okay, in the past 20 years, being unaffordable for Black families, for white families. It's because we didn't negotiate and hold our own as a city government. David Schwartzman calls the Wilson Building developer occupied territory, and it is. And if you take, and you know, yes, I do focus on donors to campaigns because developers have an outsized influence at the Wilson Building. And if you look at where people are getting their money from in this race, and yes, it's the Washington Post endorsed candidates, let's make a connection there. They are interested in making a profit. They are interested in candidates who will continue the gravy train in this city, not building housing for hardworking people who work, yes, at the Giant or as a pharmacy tech at CVS. That's who needs housing in this city. And I'll mention one more thing, Larry, on the news this morning. There was a story about how DC has the lowest rate of evictions in the area. And that's because my office worked on eviction diversion legislation and put the money behind it so that when we came out of COVID, we wouldn't have families facing eviction. But you know who fought that? The real estate industry.
And that's our time. Kareem, voters should pick you because.
Voters should pick me because I've been ahead of the curve the entirety of this election. You get 2 votes. And I'm one of the few candidates throughout the course of this election has been reminding voters that you get 2 votes. I said months ago that the chair of the housing committee at the council was asleep at the switch, and I got attacked for that. But it's true. The Housing Authority report that was just released by HUD shows that we as a jurisdiction, our council, has failed us. All of the incumbents that are asking for another 4 years, they're all on the housing committee. So you should ask them, what have they done to help make sure that our most neediest residents have actually been able to get safe, affordable, reliable housing? I've got experience actually working on equitable development projects and housing projects east of the river using public finance. So if we want improvement in the way we house our residents, I and the staff that I will train will have the ability to dive into these projects and make sure that we really are getting everything that the city's residents need in order to make sure that these new developments are fair and equitable. I promise you that as the next at-large council member, what you'll get from me is unmatched dedication, unmatched competence, and a commitment that every part of the city will see me all 4 years, and not just in the 10 months before the election. My name is Kareem Marshall. I'm running for one of the 2 at-large DC Council seats this November. I'm number 2 on the ballot, and I'm asking for one of your 2 votes. Thank you.
Thanks, Kareem. Fred, you're up. Voters should pick you because.
Okay, voters should pick me because I am the only person that's on this panel and the only person that will be sitting on the council that has business ownership experience. Part of what we see in the city right now is that our small business community has been reduced tremendously year after year, chopped away at, because there's no inclusion programs put in place to make sure that our small businesses can compete with the large developers that are out here. And more than many of us are capable and competent. But when we don't have government leadership that looks at the real issues of racial disparity, income disparity, housing disparity, food disparity, education disparity, public safety disparity, we're never going to have a change of what we see right now until we make a change of the people who have already failed us. I'm a veteran, as I said before, and I understand planning and execution to the level of where, when you look at what's being done right now, it is not a secret. Everyone has recognized that the developers have had their hands in this government's cookie jar of the real investors in this city. I am not looking for an endorsement of an organization that doesn't vote. I'm not looking for an endorsement that comes from an organization where the members don't really live in the district. I am looking for the endorsement of the people of Washington, D.C. Those who I know I have served for a long time, very long time. For the last 7 years, I have run a food distribution network across this city for those low and no income families. But most recently, it's hit even the middle income families because a gallon of milk is cost more than a gallon of gas right now. And so we've got to do things differently. When we talk about creating housing in the city, we need to make sure that we get back off of our seniors, provide them with zero taxes for real estate. And when we do that, we create an opportunity where they can transfer that wealth to the young and their families. And then also, when you do that, you find that my studies have revealed that the results have been lower than what it costs to rent a 1-bedroom apartment for that new family member that paid the taxes.
And that's our time, Fred. Thanks so much. Thank you, Fred. And Kenyon, we'll wrap with you. Voters should pick you because.
Voters should pick me because I offer more than just rhetoric. I offer more than bills that other people have authored. Voters should pick me because to deliver on a promise of a brighter tomorrow for our city's most vulnerable residents, it takes someone who has experience and a track record of delivering results, someone who cares deeply about the entire city, not just certain neighborhoods. It doesn't take someone who the Washington Post reported is under investigation for allegations that they violated campaign finance laws when they use campaign funds to pay for a poll for a race in Ward 3. Voters should pick me because this work is not just a job for me. I'm invested in what happens in DC across all 8 wards. I've represented Ward 5 in the District of Columbia, but I've showed up to various parts of our city more routinely than one of the current at-large council members currently on this Zoom. I have the professional experience and the legislative record to back that up. On November 8th, I'm asking you to cast one of your 2 at-large votes for me, Kenyon McDuffie, to ensure your DC Council has leadership that delivers thoughtful solutions to intractable issues and makes your neighborhood safer, giving every resident in our city an opportunity to succeed in our beautifully diverse and growing District of Columbia. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our candidates for joining us for these conversations. Early voting is already underway, and in-person voting takes place November 8th. Don't forget to cast your ballot for this year's general election. For everyone here at Candidate Conversations and at DCTV, I'm Larry Brown Jr. We'll see you next time.